Hi, this is Mark Bernard with the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity Excellence. And today I have a quick presentation that I'm going to be doing on the 5 steps to adopting ISO 27001. And the first step is writing a project charter. I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on that in a moment. Business plan, writing a business plan, starting the governance committee, getting that set up, writing a program manual, so including all of the steps and procedures that the CISO or the security manager or privacy manager should be following on a daily, weekly basis. And then the flip side of that, of course, is the operations manual. So our friends over in the IT area or in other parts of the business also have some responsibilities and some procedures that they need to follow. So these 5 steps will set you up with a beautiful, world-class international program. So without further ado, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so under the project charter, and the reason why we use Project Charter is because this is a really favorite way for management to approve and to deal with strategic initiatives or tactical planning. A lot of organizations have adopted project management as a way to approve activities or changes within their organization. So just following the project charter methodology and developing a project charter and getting approval for that, and then initiating a project plan, a strategy, will get you a long ways with approval with the senior management team and the executive team. So within that project charter, we're going to touch on some things. First of all, we're going to appoint a program manager or project manager. We're going to have an implementation strategy. We're going to get an executive sponsor. We're going to have a purpose for the adoption, some goals that we're going to achieve as part of the project charter, the benefits for the adoption, scope of implementation, the implementation risks in case there's changes to the organization or maybe resource challenges. What required skills are needed in order to execute the project. So we're going to create a work breakdown structure and list out the skills that need to be included in that project. We're going to talk about the deliverables. The deliverables include a conformity matrix, which is a popular way for auditors to be able to map the actual controls to the procedures. And this is very useful for the team to get familiar with and maintain as a living document. We're going to create the business plan, as I mentioned, establish the governance committee, write a program manual and operations manual. And another important part of this project charter, of course, is the issue resolution team. Now, under the business plan, we're going to appoint, again, the program manager will be the person. So this is the CISO, again, or it's the security manager who's responsible for the business plan on an annual basis. They're going to populate this. Now, when you go through clauses 4 to 10, there's a number of items in there that a lot of people sort of do a checkbox kind of activity. They check it off and they say, okay, I've done this, it's done. But that's actually not the right way to do it. Because this is a quality management system, we're supposed to, plan, do, check, act. So part of the planning part is to create a business plan for the cybersecurity program. So again, we're going to appoint a manager. Within the business plan, we're going to do some strategic planning. So we're going to map the organizational strategic mission and goals to the program goals. So to make sure that we're supporting the enterprise or the organization and what they're trying to achieve. We're going to also break that down a little bit further and unpack it a bit and get tactical planning in works. So we're going to be planning out some projects for the year. We're going to be planning out the program. We're going to make sure that we map what we're doing to the corporate mission. We're going to talk about the scope of the program. So it depends. If you're a small organization, might not be so much of an issue, but if you're an international organization with multiple sites and locations, there may be some areas where maybe they already have security programs, and so you're just covering off certain areas. So we need to talk about the scope. The scope will also relate closely to the requirements if you decide to go for certification. Now, not all my customers actually go for certification registration. Most of them do, but some of them actually use ISO 27001 just as a framework to build their own security program. and they never actually go for certification, but they have a world-class program running in their enterprise. Okay, so program scope, we talk about the legal obligations in the business plan, and that includes laws, regulations, and any contractual obligations. We talk about enterprise risk management. Now, this is more about strategic risk management. So these are the risks that affect the enterprise that the enterprise is facing. This is really important to include in the cybersecurity business plan, because a lot of times business plans are singularly focused on implementing new technology and that sort of stuff, and that doesn't actually really help the organization a lot if it's not done with the view of the enterprise and what the enterprise needs. So we need to do enterprise risk management, make sure that we're lining up with the risks of the enterprise. We need to talk about how we're going to be doing our communications, whether it's internally or externally. We're going to create a program roadmap, and I have a clever way of doing that through the risk assessment process. We're going to talk about key performance indicators. So we want to establish key performance indicators. Initially, we're going to propose probably 25, and we're going to narrow that down to about 5, and we're going to keep those for about a year just to monitor our progress. And then maybe at the end of that year, we'll sit down with the governance committee and review the KPIs and see if we need to change them up a little. We're going to talk about the fiscal projects. So the fiscal projects will lead to fiscal budgeting. So we have a budgeting for the program, but also as part of the continual improvement process and the roadmap, there's going to have to be some new projects that come on. So maybe we need a new identity access system. Maybe we need better monitoring and detection. Maybe the old system is, because technology is good for about 3 to 5 years, and then technology tends to get old, or there's newer technology that comes along that's more efficient and effective. So we tend to change technology every 3 to 5 years. That's just kind of a known thing in ICT. And then we need a personnel plan. So we need to know how many people are we going to have. So part of the budget will not just be about the technology and about the ongoing activities, but it'll also be about ramping up. So in the case of ISO, they give you 3 years to get your program fully developed. And so we might go through that process to identify who it is that we need to be on that program and how we're going to ramp up on a personnel basis. So we might start out with one person. It might be just a CISO, and then they add an analyst, and then they add an auditor, and on it goes, right, until the team is well staffed. And then we're going to talk about establishing the governance committee. So part of that will be to create a terms of reference and listing the executive team members. So it needs to be, the people on that team need to be the people who are responsible for resources and budgets. So this is a very important aspect of governance. The chairperson, I always recommend that it's the program manager, because the chairperson is the person who's going to be doing all the work, and they're going to be bringing the reporting to the executive team and asking them for their decisions. So we don't expect the executive team to be reporting on the program. That's the program manager, and the chair is the best position for them to be sitting in. I mentioned the terms of reference. They're going to establish the risk management policy and the appetite. We're going to, again, set performance indicators. They could be key performance indicators, key risk indicators, or key control indicators. Part of the risk assessment is going to lead to a risk treatment plan. So we're going to be bringing that to the governance committee and having them review the progress of the risk treatment. CAPA status. So in case you're not familiar with this is another ISO term. Corrective action, preventative action. This is something we use in the ISO 9000, 9001 world, which ISO 27001 was harmonized with in 2005. So it's really important to understand how quality management systems work and bring that understanding to the ISO 27000 world in cybersecurity. So we're going to help get that established. We're going to be reporting on the program status, of course. How's everything going? We're going to create a legal registry. The legal registry can only be approved by the executive committee, so that's why it's sitting here. Of course, the program manager is going to populate that with general counsel and other people involved. The executive committee will also be responsible for crisis management. So when incidents escalate, we're going to be convening the governance committee to decide what it is that we do next. So we'll need a crisis management plan, actually. The statement of applicability is an artifact that's needed to be certified. It's a master list of the controls that we approve. So controls should not be applied within the enterprise unless they've been approved by the governance committee. So a lot of times we have people kind of social engineering new controls into the process. We don't want to do that because controls actually have a cost to them associated with them, and we don't want to jack up the operational costs because someone has decided somewhere along the way that we need to implement more controls. And also there's the challenge of controls might overlap, so we need to look at it from a security architecture perspective as well. That's important. Statement of applicability needs to be finished if you want to get certified. Then we talk about documenting program security policies and approving those. So the executive committee or the governance committee are the only people that can approve policies. They own the policies, so this is where they come. The executive team will also know about mergers and acquisitions, and if they're not highly sensitive and classified, they should talk about it during the governance committee meeting so that the security manager, the program manager, can be prepared and prepare his team and his processes in order to help facilitate any sort of merger or acquisition. During mergers and acquisitions, there's always, security assessments that need to be done. There's always some kind of planning that needs to go on. We don't want to do security after the fact. We would like to do it during the process in case there's any kind of catch-22s that the executive committee aren't aware of that the CISO or the security manager might uncover. We're going to talk about interested parties. So any interested parties that have questions about our security program are going to are going to notify probably either an executive or the program manager, and we're going to bring those discussions to the governance committee and make decisions on how we're going to handle that. Now we're also going to talk about the risk register. Now the risk register is connected to the enterprise risk management plan. And so we want to know what the enterprise risks are, and we want to load those into the risk register, and then we want to keep an eye on those with the governance committee as we go through the process of managing the program. So that's very important. When we do the business plan, we go through that pretty extensively and make sure that we have a good handle. If it's not already established within a risk management group, then we're going to create it and make sure that it's part of the business plan. Board of Director Communications. So obviously, the program manager, the CISO, is going to come to the governance committee. We're going to work everything out. We're going to agree to what kind of communications should go up to the board of directors. This is very important because, as you know, there's more and more pressure on the visibility of cybersecurity at the board level. So we need to decide what is appropriate for the organization. So we don't want someone showing up at the board meeting with a lot of creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt with the board of directors, because that's not how they play. They're there to run the business and make sure the business is successful, and we're there to make sure that we facilitate that process. So very important that we work this out and get agreement with the governance committee. And then of course internal audit, and that's how the governance committee checks the program manager to make sure that everything is working as planned, as designed, and that operations is also cooperating. So internal audit is important. Internal audits will get executed, and those internal audits will be brought to the governance committee for decisions on what are the next steps. Now, under the program manual, we have a number of different areas. Of course, the program manager is going to be responsible for that. Under clauses 4 to 10, if we boil down the 162 controls that are listed there, we're going to come up with 7 key processes. One is governance, which we talked a little bit about with the governance committee. The governance committee is sort of a group of executives that are responsible for resources and assets that we meet with on a quarterly or semi-annual basis. Okay, but in between those periods of time, the program manager is responsible for governance to make sure that the governance is executed every day, every hour, and governance is followed. Risk management is also an important part of the program manual. Conducting risk assessments, managing risk. Continual improvement is also very important because not all things are risk, but some things we do want to improve on, and they might be connected at the hip. So we want to talk about both. Usually continual improvement things go into the roadmap. The program manager will also be doing training and awareness. So awareness is, raising people's awareness of cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities. And training, of course, is providing the skills to people so that they can do things like risk assessments on their own, or they can do vulnerability management. There's communications that will be involved as part of the program manager to managers, both upstream and downstream, and also externally to suppliers. Records management, very important, because records are the key to the program and demonstrating that the program is running as it should and that the procedures are being followed. Without records, we don't have any evidence, so we need records. Document control is also very important because we're going to be getting those policies, procedures, and standards published, making sure that we only have the master copies available to the people that need to have them, and making sure that they're following them will be very important. There will be project management involved. As you know, there's a business plan. There are projects in the business plan, so the program manager will be responsible for either overseeing or directly leading the projects on that business plan. Facilitating any kind of procurement, so if there's new software, new security software, or new security resources, maybe MDR, third party, what have you, then the program manager will be responsible for, gathering the requirements, working with the procurement team if there isn't any, or working with finance in order to make sure. And of course, this all has to be in the budget. So no surprises, right? So all the things that we procure need to be in the budget and need to be pre-approved by the executive team. Also, supply chain, compliance management, making sure that vendors and suppliers are following our policies, procedures, and standards. Making sure that everyone's following the security procedures and documenting those procedures, making sure the security standards are in place, especially for hardening devices and what have you. So making sure that compliance is done, and legal obligation, especially with sensitive topics like handling of personal identifiable information in all countries is a sensitive topic, but there's also many, many other kinds of sensitive information within an enterprise. So you see down here it says asset classification evaluation. So doing the classification, identification, and evaluation of information assets is very important. The company might have patents. They need to be protected. The company has strategic plans. They also need to be protected. And to a degree, marketing plans and also financial records. So there's a lot of things within an organization, a lot of types of information that are not always necessarily PII, but they need to be protected, and that needs to be included in the program. Legal obligations, I mentioned shepherd of the roadmap. So I kind of like this phrase because we do have a roadmap. So when we do a risk assessment and we set a risk appetite, some things are going to be treated immediately. They're called corrective actions. Preventative actions are more or less things that are continual improvement activities. So they're going to go on a roadmap. And the program manager will be responsible for keeping that roadmap up to date, leading some of the projects that are on the roadmap, or working with other teams, maybe IT or ICT, to help them to achieve some of these deliverables on that roadmap. CAPA management, again, this is ISO corrective action, preventative action, making sure that those documents are up to date and signed off and reviewed by the auditor. The auditor has to find them during the audit and also close them. But it's up to the program manager to work with operations in order to make sure that those CAPAs are closed. Cybersecurity architecture, that's something that the program manager will also take care of, will help design, might be completely responsible for, and just coordinate with IT and ICT to make sure that that cybersecurity architecture is in place and that we're following the plan on that. And that also could be closely connected to the roadmap. As I mentioned, asset classification, there's lots of different assets. Normally I have 6 assets that I track, but of course information assets are the primary reason why ISO 27001 was created. Facilitate any mergers and acquisitions, so don't be a roadblock. Be a person, be a team player who helps the rest of the team, the executives, achieve their goals. If they say we're going to merge or we're going to be acquired, then that's what we're going to do, and we need to make sure that we facilitate that process as best we can. And then, of course, creating a conformity matrix. And the conformity matrix is a really important document, as I mentioned before. This is something that maps our controls to our procedures and policies and standards, and also assigns a maturity level and also assigns a manager who's responsible for either carrying out that activity or contributing to that as being a consultant. Finally, step 5, operations manual. Business and technology managers are going to be assigned responsibilities for different procedures and standards within the security program. So we need to identify them. There's a number of procedures that need to be documented in the operations manual. How do we handle incident management? How do we handle vulnerability management and asset management? How do we handle cryptographic key management, change management? How do we handle security testing? How do we handle identity and access control? How do we harden systems? What are our hardening standards? Configuration management of all devices. Deployment of technology. So when we go through change management, the next step is to plan out before we do the change, we actually plan out the deployment. So that's kind of the sequence of events. We want to make sure that we're not deploying new technology at a critical time of the year for our organization that could affect us negatively and maybe bring down the system or something and create a bigger problem for us. So deployment is a very important step. Monitoring and detection, of course. Can't manage what you can't see, so we need to have good monitoring in place, whether it's a third party or an internal organization group. Maybe it's even the security team that's doing the monitoring. That's great. And then also incident recovery, so we need to have good recovery plans. So we need to have playbooks, and we need to have run books and understand what we're going to be doing depending on the scenario. So we want to test those probably annually. Even more frequently if possible, and make sure that we have a good plan on how to deal with any incidents that pop up, at least the common ones that we know, and then the other ones we'll have to, establish a war room and go through the process. But the team will be well-versed and well-trained in that process by this time, so it'll be easier for us to conduct the sort of the off-the-hoof kind of activities or incidents that happen. Service management, very important, setting service level objectives and meeting with third parties to make sure that they're respecting our sensitivity around cybersecurity threats and risks and vulnerabilities, and conducting risk assessments. Now, the program manager can also conduct risk assessments, but a lot of times operations like to do their own, so that's something we'll have to teach them how to do and help them with. And of course, procedures and standards are the responsibility as well of operations, so they need to take care of that documentation. Those are the 5 steps to success. If you want to have a successful cybersecurity program, create a project charter, a business plan, establish a governance committee, write a program manual and an operations manual, and make sure that those manuals contain the things that need to be addressed. Now, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Here's the QR code. And if you have any questions, please send them to me, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for your time, and I hope this has been helpful to you, and have a great day.